Light Touch is a non-medical wellness device designed to support calm, regulation, and more restful sleep in the midst of everyday stress. For first responders and other high-stress professionals, it offers a simple way to support steadier functioning, recovery, and overall well-being. To learn more, check out episode 317 or visit mylighttouch.com. You train for the threats you can see, but what about the ones you can't? United Diagnostic Services brings hospital-grade diagnostic technology directly to first responder agencies, making early detection of cardiovascular disease and cancer more accessible than ever. UDS provides comprehensive early detection programs using advanced ultrasound, CT calcium scoring, stress echoes, and innovative blood panels to identify potential health risks long before symptoms appear. It's proactive, on-site, and built specifically for those who serve. Early detection saves lives and careers. Learn more at udshealth.com. The views and opinions expressed by the host and guests of this show do not represent their employing agency, department, or organization. All information should be regarded as anecdotal, contextual, and educational, and should not be misinterpreted as legal or medical advice. Welcome to Blue Grit Radio, the podcast that explores making better cops for a better community. I'm your host, Eric Tung. I've been an active police officer since 2007. We will dive into the aspects of police culture, health and wellness, leadership, and mindset. You'll hear from experts not only from policing, but all industries as they relate to being our best with purpose, passion, and positivity. Join me as we share stories, lessons, and advice so we can all be better for ourselves, our teams, our families, and our communities. All right, everyone, welcome back to part 2. We're talking again with Christine Townsend, the author of Trust. It's a simple word, but it's a big word. It gets super complicated. So if you haven't listened to the first part, it's literally the last episode, intentionally aired them in that order. But we get more into Christine's story. We get into a lot of the themes overlapping in the book. And then we had such a great conversation. I literally said it on the interview, which was like, man, there's so many notes and like prongs. I just really hope that we can nudge people and teach people about. There's a lot of takeaways from this like shorter version episode. And so I'm excited to feature a lot of these things that really got my head scratching, but also just things that I felt were so poignant and so relevant that a lot of times it sounds really simple, but we haven't heard it that way, or we haven't really taken the time to pause and reflect on like what that means for us and our organization. If we care, which we do when we're talking about all these things, the headaches, like operations, how are we being most proficient? How are we performing well in a team, on our own? Any relationship, morale, culture, relationship with the public, right? Public image, politics, internal, external, like all of it comes back to trust. So Christine, thanks again for joining us once again.
Thank you for having me back. I'm glad it provoked such curiosity that we should have another episode.
Yeah. It's like all these things we keep talking about when we talk about organizational wellness, when we talk about leadership, like it keeps coming back to trust. And I just don't think that I've seen a resource that outlines these things so maybe systematically, but then overlapping all these different themes of like, there's so many layers to apply this stuff. So I'm just excited to jump into it with you.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I love how you just kick off the book talking about trust and how trust is on the decline. And it almost, the way I read it was like societally, which I would totally agree with. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, I think there's been such a shift in the way we live our lives in so many layers. It is argued that 9/11 definitely was one of those pivotal moments, I think, for people of our generations, that it was so shocking that we didn't know who we were anymore. And it just led to this, it unsettled so many things in the world order that I think from that point onwards, everything had to change. Everything changed. You'd think about, the way we lived our lives, and it impacted everyone. And so it kind of had this horrible ripple effect of whether we trusted traveling, whether we trusted institutions, why things were happening. And I think you'd have then had like the banks, the frauds, the big, big cases that really directly impacted our values as well. And of course, that led into COVID. But all these little, like, it's kind of death by a thousand cuts that we weren't acknowledging or realizing was happening, because in our world we didn't want change. No one wants really is comfortable with change, I believe.
Yeah.
But that's the one thing that is constant.
Mhm.
And so our sort of group think was shifted.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like all these things that change and kind of shatter our paradigms or like the world we think we understand. And not to go too deep, but I guess this is not going deep. The adage that cops always say, right? Like cops, the only thing that we hate more than change is things staying the same. And so we hate both. But yeah, recognizing that change is inevitable and adaptation is the key, which we talk a lot about here on the show. But when you talk about the lack of trust in institutions, and yeah, that's a very shattering paradigm. We used to just hear, and this is generations ago, right? We used to just hear the news, and the news was the word, it was truth. And we heard from the government, we heard from our bosses, and it was like, that is the word, that's what's up, that's true. And now it's not so.
No, and I think that is partly because of the people in those organizations. If you look at things like historic sex abuse cases where it's been high profile people who we've seen in the public eye for so long, they suddenly were like, That's not that person who I had in my mind, wouldn't do that." And I think we find that hard to reconcile. So when you've got, we're handing over our money to banks, we're handing over our bodies to hospitals, and throughout all of these experiences, something has changed that leads us to not trust them, and it's normally something bad, or we take for granted that these people are going to do a good job, and I think it's the people that reflect the organizations. um, and you can't have an organization without people. So how
Hmm.
you are treated by these people is what, I mean, a great example of this, and I look at it as brands as well. I went to a bagel shop last week and I had to wait for an hour because they forgot to put my order in. But the bagel was great, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
never going back because of
Yeah.
the experience. It doesn't, there's this thing about how, people trust doctors if they're good looking and kind to you
Yeah,
or
they're
nice. And
friendly,
then,
right? Hmm.
yeah, whereas they are actually sometimes often less effective or competent than others who don't speak. So it's the experience that we have with people. And if you've got lots of people slightly changing because they have small experiences, that changes, we affect each other with our groupthink around that. And because we don't want to feel left out, we tend to agree more with people because it's a survival instinct. That's the way I see it. But yeah, we did used to trust because of that source of media was very narrow. I grew up with 4 TV channels and the BBC. And the BBC was supposed to be trusted because it was a national institution. And now it's not. So, and
Yeah.
that's eroded over time. So, and there will be these, it's institutional. And I think it's like finding out Father Christmas doesn't exist
Hmm.
because you
Yeah.
put so much trust into it. And then you find out, like, well, what else isn't real? And it's that horrible moment when you realize it's like you grow up. And I think
Yeah.
that happens when we deal with organizations. And I've been on the wrong end of law enforcement treating me badly, not knowing what I did. And it was horrible. So I can only imagine what it's like for someone who doesn't have any inside world of law enforcement.
Yeah, that's such a thing. And just to reference, like there's study or studies that you could reference where yes, they analyzed malpractice suits for medical doctors, and oftentimes it wasn't correlated with experience, it wasn't correlated with credentials or efficacy. It was correlated with whether they felt like the doctor cared, whether they're friendly and patient. And so, quick side note, let's learn from that because a lot of times we have very effective officers that do care, but we get impatient, we don't show it. And so we get the complaints, we get the lawsuits, all those things. And so, again, quick sidebar, but let's be vulnerable as hard as it is because we get cynical and we'll get into that next. But let's be vulnerable and let's demonstrate like our humanity, which is a huge through line in your conversations through the book. It's like we're not just faced with this doom and gloom of like why we don't trust because the world, we're in this hyper information age and everything's like transparent. So we find all the flaws in people and organizations. And yes, it does tend to lead us towards distrust and, nihilism almost, right? Like, well, I'm just going to not partake because I'm just going to get screwed if I partake or I engage or I try and I invest and I put myself out there and I, get backstabbed or front stabbed. But what I do like is that there's the nod back to caring, patience, empathy. So maybe we do go to cynicism now, right? Because you talk about how cynicism can be a huge sign of lack of trust and where it comes from. I think a lot of times when we talk about our organizations and culture, we kind of eye roll the cynics. And I've been there, right? So I've been the eye rolled person and I've been the cynic that is eye rolling, everyone and everything. Um, but I do like paying attention to how that is a person that cares and those are people who care.
Yeah, and I think I sort of want to go back just a touch and say
Yeah.
about authenticity and vulnerability. They're two very different things. You don't have to make yourself vulnerable to be authentic. And I think the cynicism comes when people aren't doing what they say they're doing, or their words don't match their actions. And I think that comes back to wanting to be liked rather than wanting to be respected. You can be both, I think, but also when you've got a group of cynical people, you've got to wonder why they're cynical. Is it a lack of self trust or self doubt? Even again, wanting to be with the pack to be safe. It's easier to be what everyone in the room is to get through your shift,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's if you walk in and you're the one, particularly in the UK, you're the one that's all bouncy and happy and like, yeah, we're gonna have a great day today, and everyone just looks at you and goes, okay, if you say so. Um, it wears away at you, you
Yeah.
know? And so you become, it's amorphous almost. You just get absorbed into that culture. So you have to work out where the tipping point is of having a positive to a negative and who that person is and why they are that way. And that's why you
Yeah.
really need to understand the, for want of a better term, the troublemakers and cynicism. Like, why are they cynical? Is it because of what they're seeing out on the street? Is it what's going on at home? Is it because of how does the system enable them to be cynical? Because
Mhm.
there's nothing worse than going out and arresting people and them never getting charged and them never getting sent to jail. And if that happens constantly, like it does in a lot of places, then you're just like, well, what's the point? Why am I doing this? Why
Yeah.
should I do this? My work is not showing more making a difference. So therefore I don't care anymore. And
Yeah.
it kind of just it sounds miserable. And I've been there. I've completely been there.
Mhm.
And lost my meaning, my purpose, which I think is overdone a little. Like not everyone has a purpose. They just enjoy what they do. But cynicism is dangerous because it starts very small,
Mhm.
and it's like when you've always got that one person who walks in late, trying to put their uniform together. You're like, them again.
Yeah. Yeah. What are you doing here? Get your stuff together.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating how these things intersect, and I'm cautious to take a detour, but I think I'm gonna go there. But yeah, you're talking about the bouncy chipper, and usually it's like the rookie, right? The person that comes
Hmm.
in, just like we all did, like 99% of us came in because we not wanted to make little differences and do these like kind of micro improvements in the community. No, we wanted to change things. We wanted to shake things up, put it all out there. Like we wanted to clean up the streets. We wanted to like really, really help shape the community, like make it a better place, like really make an effect. And after a while, especially in a grinding type of let's say agency or climate, yes, it does feel like you're going to the same places, the street corners that are really bad. They were bad before you started. That you feel like they're going to be bad far after you leave. And so you do get naturally to this like, what's the point? And right. So when you have this like bouncy, I think the word bouncy, right? There's probably a reason why it was a rabbit in Zootopia, or I want to say internationally Zootopia was named something else, and it kind of confused me for a bit, but it's like it's I forget, but you'll find it online when you look at like the movie. But yeah, Officer Hops was like this sprightly, chipper bunny that just can't, nothing can tank her attitude, but everyone else is just almost more annoyed and more drained by that person existing, right? And so, in a typical climate, what does that do over time? That person becomes a target of some sort, and
Hmm.
they are, kind of forced or compelled to I suppose, like, conform, right? And then that stifles the energy, that stifles the passion, that stifles creativity. And ironically, the paradox is like those are the things we need so much more of if we're going to get out of the ruts and if we're going to overcome the challenges that we keep getting faced with as a profession.
And well, it's easier to be miserable.
Misery loves company, right? That's a reason why we
Exactly.
say that.
And I think also it does come from self doubt. It is like, well, why can't I be happy like that? What's wrong with me? I know I've had that. Like, what? I don't understand. I should be proud of what I do. I should be. And there's that background that goes on against a backdrop of organizational mistrust. And then when you go out, you are that person representing an organization that people don't trust.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, hang on, I'm trustworthy. I just work for a place that you perceive to be lacking or you don't trust. So you've got that tension of opposites as well. So
Yeah.
you kind of you find yourself thinking, well, I don't trust myself anymore because I'm being told all the time by the public or stakeholders that I need to do better. So I'm trying my best to do better, but the system won't allow me.
Mm. Yeah. That self trust is a focal point that comes a little bit later. And I love that you had it. Like I earmark that and underline that because I think like anything, if you want more of it, you have to start with you. Like you start with your locus of control, and that's quite small but quite significant. It's you. Like if you want to improve leadership, you lead yourself. If you want to improve wellness in a group, you become a better, more well person. And so trust as well. And I think that that's a great place to kind of connect back to several of the themes we already talked about, right? So if you have the bouncy, optimistic, like super optimistic rookie, and those around see him or her as being maybe toxic. They might feel like it's toxically positive. They might feel like it's unrealistic, and so that becomes like it hits something in them that feels self protective, and maybe they want to protect her or him from their own expectations because they're reminded of when they came in quote unquote naive and too optimistic, and then they got hit by the 2x4 that is real life, and they got hit by going out on the street being really tenacious with your police work and then getting written up because you crashed a car or you violated policy accidentally or someone complained, and then that does cause us to reclude, right? And I love how even in your book you talk about the kind of the biological responses there, right? We are really good expert pattern recognizers in the job to be successful, but then we start to see patterns very maybe too efficiently. And if you do this, then it may cause this. If you go out and be proactive, then you may get complaints. You may get written up. You may get your hand slapped. And then, so what does that lead us to do? That leads us to see danger where it may or may not be. And then we just put up the walls of distrust more, which will just, if we want to get to more trust, then of course we have to use it as a currency. And as you outline, that's the paradox. If you want more of it, you have to give it, but you can't receive it until you give it or you open up to it.
And I think as well, we are blind or at least numbed to when we do get a member of the public that trusts us or is interested in us or is kind to us. And we're kind of like, why are you doing that?
Yeah.
Because you're so used to that you do. I was always told, don't make the job up before you've got there. Because in my mind, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to have to make sure this is on and that's on, and I'm going to get there and I'm going to say this to them, then I'm going to go and do that. And they're like,
Yeah.
you have to trust yourself
You got to
when you
roll with
get
it.
there
Yeah.
to know what to do.
Yeah.
And I think when you're young in service, it's like, I have to get everything right. If I don't get everything right, blah, blah, blah. As you get older in service, you're like, I have to get everything right because I want to keep my pension. It's like the difference of life stage as well. And I think age plays a big part of that. And I, on the self trust piece, that's definitely something that came to me later in life for sure. But yeah, we are physiologically geared up to protect ourselves and to survive. It's just amplified when you're in law enforcement by hundreds of times. If you got like six regular members of the public come in sitting on a briefing, they'd be fascinated. It would be exciting and interesting, and and they wouldn't. that energy would shift it entirely. Um, so I think, yes, you do have to be more open minded. And every time I go out and try to find a one small thing that's good, that's new, that shaped my perception of someone, where I can trust the people again. Because I'm still building back my trust of people
Yeah.
after
Yeah, of
years of not being out on the street. But I
course.
still hypervigilance, and that's why I wanted to kind of unpack all this to understand, why don't I trust these people and why do I trust those people? I mean, of course, that's PTSD as well, but it just fascinates
Yeah.
me.
Yeah, for sure. It's like if those experiences have like significantly jarred your outlook on things, you have certain responses to things, and of course that's gonna create these interrupts. I like how you talked about perfectionism, right? Like so going out and thinking I gotta say this, and if that's said then this. Yeah, it doesn't mean just go out without training or prep. It's but once you have the training, you do have to, allow that leap of faith and roll with it. You have to be able to roll the punches. You say something that seems like it was not ideal, then you can recover, right? Like you can amend what you said. You can say, "I'm sorry, that's not what I meant." Like that's just normal human interactions. We over prescribe ourselves and we get fixated. And yeah, for sure, perfectionism is a lack of trust of yourself. Like you have to have it all dialed in before you ship it, whether that's a call response or whether that's like an email or an article. Um, and then micromanaging, I think of as like lack of trust in those technically your subordinates, right? So you are hyper focused, you're over control. It's like command and control because you don't trust that they're going to do a good enough job. And I've heard people say, no, I'm just really involved or I'm just like a details person. Like, sure, that may be true as well. But ultimately, at the end of the day, if you are micromanaging, you don't trust them. Uh, and it doesn't mean it's malicious. Like I started that way for sure as a newer supervisor. And I think that whenever you go to a new group, it is something to be aware of where if you care, then yes, you need to know what everyone's doing, but there's a way to kind of amend that. Um, and I think that I love these conversations because I think that they really lead people to be reflective in what is the status of my organization? What is the status of me and my coworkers? And how am I contributing to that? And it might be overtly, it might be these really subtle things. Um, and maybe I'll just connect it back to a couple of things that we've already discussed. I just saw this in a book by Dr. Kaufman, but he's talking. It was a graphic, and you talked about purpose at earlier, right? And people want to go out and change the world, but then you're like, not everyone needs a purpose. Some people just want to show up, do a good job, and like that is a purpose, and it's probably just a way more realistic one that reduces the gap in expectation and reality, which is probably going to keep someone a bit more adaptive and resilient. But in that graphic, to go back to it, you imagine almost like a pyramid shape, and it was actually drawn like a sailboat. And so the very top of the sail was purpose, and there's a few stages in between, but at the very bottom, the bottom one was security. And so for me, I'm like, man, we talk about what's your purpose, what's your purpose, what's your why, but have we actually recognized what's the environment? Do you feel safe to do your job, right? Do you feel safe to go out and operate and interact with your coworkers? Um, Psychological safety, right? Literal safety
Mhm.
in our job. And if you don't have those things met, which unfortunately many of us don't, that's why we keep talking about all these things and what we need leaders to do, what we need in our organizations, then how are we going to reach that purpose? Because that comes much later.
Yeah, I think when you mentioned about, I'll go back to your micromanagement part. I think it's not necessarily about rank so much. It could be anyone who's in your orbit that has an impact upon your work and your reputation.
Mm, hmm.
And so, therefore, it could be your crew partner.
Yeah,
You could be exactly the same level, but if you see them doing something, you're like, no, why don't you do it like this? Because you're concerned that that is going to have an impact on you,
well, that's so
because you don't
true.
trust them and you don't
Hmm.
trust yourself. So it can go up and down and around. And I think it's more a case of, well, what does this mean for me if they mess this up?
Hmm.
And so if you're a new supervisor, that's going to be heightened because you have to prove yourself. But you can't get people to change their ways like that. That takes time. that needs trust from them for you. And then you're like, you need to perform, you need to do better. Why?
Yeah.
We're doing fine, actually. No, I've got people to answer to. You know that,
Yeah,
what rolls
it's
downhill.
complicated. And even when you're giving those examples, I'm thinking of, like, very common archetypes. Everyone knows this person, even if they're not in policing, right? There's the hard chargers. They're great because 'cause they're hard chargers, and then there's kinda, like, sometimes they're called, sometimes it's called, like, meat eaters and, like, the foragers, right? Like, the hunters and the foragers, right? Some people go out there, they find the criminal, or they find the warrant subjects, on their own, and then other people have to do the dispatch calls. Truly, you need both, and the best cops that I know, historically, are a good hybrid of both. However, there's like the people that spend too long on calls, and then they're an archetype because they're lazy and they're going to make me take more calls because they're milking that call. But really, sometimes those are thorough people. And then conversely, the people that just clear the screen, they handle all the calls really quickly. Well, a lot of times they are, sweeping stuff under the rug, and it gets kicked up in the next shift. People call back. They're like, yeah, that the problem wasn't solved. Or the next morning you get a complaint and somebody else is handling it. A supervisor's not handling it. So you actually didn't bring a positive effect like you thought you were, because your goal is different. And so the goal is not to get into the nitty gritty of all these things, or the supervisor where you're trying to kind of please both types. Somebody's saying, hey, this person's never taking dispatch calls because they're out there doing fun stuff. Meanwhile, the other person's like, that person's spending too long on calls. You do the best you can, and I think really by my purpose in bringing up all these little archetypes are they're so prevalent. So then, where do we, in the context of trust, like where do we focus on, and what do we identify so that we can move forward? So because these are just types of personalities that are going to always exist.
And they will. I think the issue is actually, it's a lot of times in policing, square pegs and round holes. So if we actually don't look at the person, but look at the roles instead, like who could we put here where we get the most out of them instead of making people be all things to all people?
Yeah,
Why not be more like, okay, what are your skills? And that starts building trust when you feel seen, not go out there and do as I say. More like, well, where do you think you would thrive? Where do you think you would excel? And I appreciate that in the first instance, we need response officers. It's vital. However, I think there can be a more sophisticated way of looking at it. I appreciate this is way out there, but you have to start these conversations to say, well, why are we always doing it the same way?
yeah,
Like, I hated taking public phone calls, the non-emergency phone calls, hated it. So I was just grumpy all the time. The minute I got onto monitoring traffic CCTV and was doing all my geeky stuff, I
mm,
thrived.
yeah,
I literally moved one desk along, but the whole atmosphere changed because someone
yeah,
said, "Do you want to try something else, maybe?"
mm,
So I think if we look at, and yeah, there are always going to be lazy people, the station cat we would call them.
hmm,
But then there are also those people who they spend too long on a call, not because they're trying to push off other stuff away, because they're trying to make someone feel safe. Or I've had those where I'm like, we need to go, stop
hmm,
chatting to them.
hmm,
And then you get in the car and they're like, what's the matter? I was like, you spent way too long with that person. Yeah, but that's community engagement.
yeah. According to who,
That's
right?
building trust with them. We now know that if we go to them, they will tell us more.
Yeah, and I think that kicks up what you brought up earlier, which is authenticity, right? Like,
Hmm.
just like leaning into your strengths, and it's a lot easier with a really dialed in team with really strong supervisors and mentors and coaches. Like, hey, I can anticipate what a lot of people say. It's like, yeah, that's all fine and well if you have a large city, a large agency where you can specialize and you have all these different opportunities. You do have people that are just focused on investigations of a certain niche, and then you do have people that are in this, very like 90% community role. But most agencies are quite small in the states, and everyone has to be a generalist. To which I would say there is a way to hack it, and if you're nimble, then you be organic with it. And I've seen a lot of examples of that through the years. I've been in a mid-sized agency, but I even knew different squads that they had essentially semi-official agreements that that person was going to take all collisions, all, you know, DWIs or DUIs, and that person was going to take domestics, and they didn't mind the calls and or they liked those types of calls, right? And even, and I think it goes to career development, personal development, succession planning. If you trust your people and you elevate them, you put them in the roles, like you have people basically doing the specialization before they get into that unit, right? You have people that are the go-to negotiators when they haven't even received the certification or the role, but you know that they're very promising and they're doing way better and they're way more attuned than, 90% of the people out there.
I mean, I think when it comes to leadership, portfolio policing is very important. I don't think it's wise to have people who rise through the ranks in one particular pillar of policing, because eventually they will be called upon to lead people from other areas of policing. And if you don't understand those people, it'd be like detectives who go through the ranks and then they're told to like manage a search unit or something, like public order or something like that. So I think it's very important that if you have decided early on in your career that you want to get into a leadership position, that you take the time to spend with each department. Because not only that, but as you rise, everyone will remember you that, oh, they took time to spend with us. And that is like, there are people that are like, oh, they're just a career climber. They just want to get to the top as soon as possible so they can be in charge. I think if you demonstrate that you've got to know people, got to know the organization, and as you go each rank, when you do get further up, you are going to more likely be trusted.
Hmm. Yeah.
And unless you're someone, I've had it before where I've had a chief walk in. I'm like, who are you? Like, and I'm meant to be your comms person. Where did you come from? Oh, I've been in fraud for the last 20 years. It's like,
Right.
okay. And
Yeah.
you expect everyone to just do as you say, you know.
Think this is a perfect time to hit on a section you have, which there's a carryover. It's not directly at this point, but people will understand. But it's actually like how leaders of all ranks, or if you look at yourself as the self leader to bring more trust, how do you work towards that? And I love how you boil it down to three simple steps that you expand upon. But number one is to acknowledge where the distrust, where the obstacles have been, where the mistakes have been. Number two is to understand, and number three is to demonstrate. Like, give people a reason to show you're trustworthy, right? Give people proof that you are working to mend this fence. And so I think even that's a great example, right? If you are assigned to a new role and you are taking things over, rather than be a micromanager, like go in with an open mind and be curious, right? Because if you follow that format, although it was written in the context of how do you start mending trust, same thing here, right? People don't know you. So, we reference back to earlier parts of the conversation, they will probably default to lack of trust or, the jury's out. So acknowledge, hey, I'm new. I got a lot to learn. So you understand, you show that understanding through meeting, through doing more listening than talking. I've misstepped there for sure. I've been brought in and taken over units, and I had a lot of uh, expectations to remedy things, to make things better. Guess what? Most of those expectations weren't pushed down from my boss. Most of them I assumed, or I thought I knew what the boss wanted. And this might sound bad, but a lot of times the boss just wants you to run things and not hear about issues, right? They just out of sight, out of mind. And that actually, it might sound bad like disengagement, but it might be also a layer of trust. Like they trusted me to go run it. When I brought things, they're like, sure, yeah, do what you think. Um, but making a lot of waves where it was unnecessary, I think, as a younger sergeant taking things over, rather than having patience and grace and giving folks, maybe not demonstrating that hey, I'm trying to help and remove some of these obstacles and run interference. But if you come in hot, people aren't going to see it, and so I recognize that now.
I think the biggest mistake a lot of people make is that they feel they have to make change,
Yeah.
when in actual fact, part of the skill is recognizing that actually this isn't a bad department. Well, I need to keep a steady ship for now, just see and let it breathe. It's like cheese. You don't eat it straight out of the fridge, right? 'Cause it
Yeah.
doesn't taste good. You just get it out to see where the land lies, because we all have this perception. I think when you do get promoted in whichever role you're in, or if you get a new relationship, for example, it's like, I have to be the best one they've ever had, right? So
Mhm.
you go in like, I'm going to change this. I've got these ideas. And it's like, maybe it doesn't need it just yet. Why don't you let them feel safe? Because what's the first thing that happens when a new supervisor comes in? They're like, oh no, they're going to change this and they're going to change that. And the one thing people need, particularly in highly stressful environments and situations, is a calm hand. They don't want to change because that's what keeps them safe, is it
Mhm.
being the same just for a little bit. Um, and we've seen this in communications, when we've had change of leadership or what have you, the first thing that comes up is the internal comms around that. So it's sometimes I've seen it work where people say what they're not going to do rather than what they are going to do. And that reassures people from the off, like, don't worry, we're not going to make you into single crewings all the time. Don't worry, we're not going to cut overtime. We may have to in the future.
Mhm.
So reassuring them what's not going to happen.
Yeah. I've heard that anecdote a lot, from, different, maybe the private sector where a new CEO comes in or maybe even in the existing, right? But they step up and say, "Hey, there's a lot of volatility out there in the market, or there's a lot of uncertainty." And sometimes that's even saying, "I don't know what's going to happen. Here's what I hope, and here's what
Mhm.
I'd like to focus on." And just that pause and that again, whether you want to call it authenticity or vulnerability, there might be a mixture therein to say, "Hey, yeah, I don't know. I'm the leader, and I'm supposed to bring confidence." But that authentic transparency, that genuineness does bring confidence, right? Because it shows we are together in this. So I've gave an example of taking over a unit and going into fixing like firefighting mode. Um, Not super effective. At the same time, I can think back to being a patrol sergeant in 2020 where I best of my memory was very much like, "Hey, I don't know what the future holds. I What I do know is that we have each other and I feel really strong about this team." And so we started hypothesizing all these different scenarios. There were all these law changes that weren't in effect yet, but we're like, "Okay, like let's assume all these things happen. How would we carry on or how can we hybridize this?" Because we weren't getting guidance from my boss at the time, and that was really disheartening to us. So I was like, "Okay, what can we do at our level so we feel like we are being still physically safe, but also like legally safe?" Because that was a very uncomfortable, uncertain time. Um, and so we did our job, right? We went out there and we still had a good time, I guess, as much as you could. Like I remember having a lot of very rambunctious, like hilarious conversations. We would barbecue. We would control what we could, right? But I would say for
Exactly.
sure within that group, that squad, there was a lot of trust in um, a very volatile environment nationally, regionally, where trust was not ample. At least we could build it where we could.
Well, and this is the thing. I think talking about things takes away half of it, because we make things up in our head, because there's a big internal piece to this. And also, I think society rewards change makers with the wrong things. So we want to, I think also that's partly ego. We can go in and say, I changed that. I was the first one to do this. And who are we doing it for? Are we doing it for the team? Are we doing it for us? Are we doing it for another promotion? Like, what we need to look at why, and that comes back to the self trust part, and acceptance. And it's the whole cliche of accept what you can't change.
Hmm.
Don't worry about the rest and change what you can. If it's it, you talk about it like that, and you say, well, this let's look at all possible scenarios. Like, what do you think? What do you think? And I think asking for people's opinions, and also standing there and saying, or sitting there and just saying, right, hit me with it. What are your concerns? And I don't know if I mentioned it in the last one. We had a big merger where we were having to bring two police forces together. There's going to be a lot of money being lost, a lot of jobs. So instead of just like occasional 1 week newsletter or something, we opened up a forum and we got them to put all their concerns. It was like a rumor control thing. And then we go in, speak to the chief, because you can't get around like 8,000 people realistically as a chief. You have to think of ways to kind of get everyone's concerns addressed and not do it as a trickle down either, because that's where rumors come in. And we just filmed him and said, right, here's one question, here's one rumor, and he would answer them honestly. And then that became tweet alongs, which was blatant. But that was something. It was like, let's all say what we think and feel, but you sometimes you can't do that when you don't trust. So it's so many pieces, so
Yeah.
many. It's a web for sure. You pull the wrong one, it upsets someone over there, and but I do believe that it really does come down to you first. Do you trust yourself to know what you want, know that you can do it, And I think it's okay to not have that all the time. But I think we need to be definitely more inward looking rather than being quick to mistrust other people first and look at why we don't trust them.
Yeah. I think that's a fantastic place as we bring all these concepts together because we hit a lot and there's a lot for people to think about. I think there's a lot of people that are going to go back to different parts of the episode and be like, man, maybe I need to listen to that again and think about where that resonates in your relationships. That's in work, outside of work, maybe your neighbors and beyond. And so when we think about where do we sit, with ourselves, starting with us, uh, there's sections, towards the end, as you would imagine, about legacy. And it makes me think about this notion of like, are we helping? Am I personally helping my organization's, lack of trust or my organization's culture or my morale issue or what have you by how I'm conducting myself? Because there's going to be a ripple effect. Um, I do want to ask you. We talked about moral courage, and that's not a commonly socialized phrase. And so I do encourage those that haven't listened to listen back to the last episode. But let's talk about as we bring together legacy and our role in a group. Let's talk about institutional courage. Can you tell us what that is, and kind of where you would bring that to people's forefront as they think about all these concepts tied together?
I think to have institutional courage, that's challenging because particularly in law enforcement, we are very much dependent relationally on other departments and also the people within who work for us. So basically, it comes down to, do we cover bad actions up? How do we handle it? Do we call out our bad actors in the organization? Do we challenge other departments that didn't perform? Because if we've got multi agency responses to things, for example, we know about some very high profile cases where one agency's fallen short and caused issues for other agencies or departments or like federal otherwise. Do we call them out? Do we hide it? Are we seen to be complicit then if by allowing it to happen again, if we don't call out those challenges or the policies that are wrong, that aren't right for our people? And then I think that kind of, it's a bit of a Venn diagram of like the organization and the people within it, like challenging each other. You have to have someone who will say what that person did was wrong. We don't condone it. We are going to look into it. We are going to make a change if change is necessary, and standing by that. And that's the most common thing I would think in institutional trust is, will the public be like, yeah, they're learning from there. What's gone wrong? Why has it gone wrong? I think that's really important rather than what would so often happen was officers in domestic incidents, for example. We know that that's common. They wouldn't get fired, or they'd get fired. And one thing that I noticed has shifted is that when there was a lot of issues around police officers in the UK and sexual predators and things like that from the Wayne Cousins um, scandal, was awful. They were not being. They were. It was basically said, "We've got rid of them. They're gone." Not, why did you do it? You know, tell me what led you to sexually abuse or harass or whatever that thing was that they were going to get fired for. Why? No one asks about that. It's not like we learned from this, because you didn't, because it's happening and happening again and again and again. And I think that moral courage there is to say, why did you do it? Please help us understand it so we can ensure that we protect other people from getting to a point where they feel they need to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, out of sight, out of mind. "Hey, let's move on," and people are sometimes not ready to move on.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I've seen that many times in my own professional life, personal life. It's, but why did you do that? They get it, they're made an example of, yes, but it's like, I don't want to hear it, because I think a lot of times the reason they did it is because of institutional failures in mental health support, for example, to
Well, I
here.
think it
But
yeah, it does tie back to the order of 3 that you shared, which is like, how do we work to fix this? And that's as individuals in a team, that's as individuals leading a team. And so when we talk about, institutional courage, it's the same order, right? We acknowledge what happened and we seek to understand and we demonstrate. And maybe the acknowledgement was so brief and we skip number 2, the understanding, and that's where it created an additional ripple of kind of hurt or distrust. And so I think it's very relevant as we tie this back all together. And I appreciate, again, if it's not clear, the book. So any closing thoughts, Christine, as we kind of bring this bouquet together, and please tell people where they can find you, reach out, and find the book.
yeah, I just think, now more than ever, we need to really give everyone a little break and just let something come through. And it's unfortunately now harder than ever to do that. But I think a small shift for everyone, tiny little thing of finding something or someone to trust every day, will help us all together collectively. Um, but it's a big subject, and I appreciate that. And I know that it's maybe too big for some people to kind of take on board day to day in a working environment. But I hope that someone gets something from this that will help them feel a little safer. And you can find my books and trainings at christinetownsend.com. And I'm really grateful to everyone who's taken the time to listen to this. So thank you.
Yeah, I love it. I love how you kind of button it up with like giving some grace, giving some pause. It certainly has helped me, reading this. It even helped me understand some of my people, why when somebody and I know why they feel this way, why they're cynical, and why they act or speak this way. But it's helped me even look at some of the sections to be like, okay, so how can I amend the environment, or how can I frame things for them patiently, with grace, and certainly very tangible. There's a lot of very high level concepts, but then a lot of really, I suppose, more simple ways to approach the information that's very applicable for everyone. So thank you again so much, Christine.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning into another episode of Blue Grit Radio. As always, support this community by subscribing, giving us a 5-star review, and following, liking, and sharing posts on Blue Grit Wellness on Instagram. You can reach me there or email me at bluegritwellness@gmail.com. Be well and stay gritty.